Walter Elias Disney was born on December 5, 1901, in the bustling city of Chicago, Illinois. He was the fourth son of Elias and Flora Disney, two people whose hard work and devotion to family would profoundly influence his life. The Disneys were a middle-class family of modest means, but high ideals. Walt's father, Elias, was a stern, industrious man who cycled through various jobs, from carpenter to farmer to newspaper delivery contractor, all in pursuit of stability. His mother, Flora, a school teacher, provided the warmth and tenderness that balanced Elias's strictness. The combination of discipline and encouragement would form the dual forces that shaped Walt's approach to life and art. A restless drive for perfection, tempered by a deep belief in the goodness of humanity. In 1906, when Walt was 5 years old, the family relocated to a farm in Marceline, Missouri, a decision that would change his life forever. Marceline became the living symbol of innocence and wonder in Walt's imagination. The small-town charm, the dusty roads, the friendly neighbors, and the sense of community would later serve as the blueprint for Main Street, USA, the nostalgic heart of every Disneyland park. It was in Marceline that Walt first encountered the beauty of storytelling. He would spend hours sketching the animals that roamed the fields and the trains that cut through the countryside. Even as a child, he possessed a vivid imagination, one that turned everyday life into a theater of dreams. When the family's farming venture failed, the Disneys moved again, this time to Kansas City in 1911. There, Walt's father bought a newspaper delivery route, and the young boy was enlisted to help. The job was grueling, with pre-dawn wake-up calls and long walks in biting winter air. Yet this experience instilled in him a relentless work ethic and an understanding that dreams required sacrifice. Despite his heavy workload, Walt nurtured his love for art. He often doodled in the margins of his school books and found inspiration in the pages of the Saturday Evening Post and Puck magazine. By his early teens, Walt's interest in art had become an unshakable passion. He attended McKinley High School in Chicago, where he contributed cartoons to the school paper. Around the same time, he enrolled in night classes at the Chicago Academy of Fine Arts, where he learned the fundamentals of drawing and composition. Though money was tight, his family recognized his talent, even if they didn't fully understand it. Walt's artistic ambitions, however, were soon interrupted by a global crisis that would test his courage and ignite his sense of adventure. When World War I erupted, Walt longed to serve his country. Too young to enlist in the army, he forged his birth certificate and joined the Red Cross Ambulance Corps in 1918. He was sent to France, where he drove ambulances and trucks, painting cheerful cartoons on the sides of vehicles to lift morale. Though he never saw combat, the experience exposed him to a world beyond the Midwest, a world full of stories, cultures, and possibilities. The war deepened his imagination and convinced him that life itself could be transformed through creativity and optimism. When he returned to the United States in 1919, Walt was determined to make a career in art. He moved back to Kansas City and began working for a commercial art studio, where he created advertisements for local businesses. There he met another young artist who would become his lifelong collaborator, Ub Iwerks. Together, the two experimented with the new and exciting medium of animation. They produced short cartoons using crude equipment in Walt's garage, learning by trial and error. This small operation, known as Laugh-O-Gram Studio, became Walt's first foray into animation entrepreneurship. However, the early years were anything but easy. Laugh-O-Gram struggled financially, and by 1923 the studio went bankrupt. Yet even in failure, Walt discovered a guiding truth. Creativity and perseverance could coexist with disappointment. He refused to give up, believing that each setback was a stepping stone towards something greater. With only $40 in his pocket and a suitcase full of sketches, Walt boarded a train to California, a decision that would forever alter the landscape of entertainment. The journey west symbolized more than a move. It was a pilgrimage toward the realization of his dreams. Los Angeles, with its burgeoning film industry and sunny optimism, seemed like fertile ground for a young artist with big ideas. As the train rumbled through the desert, Walt later recalled thinking, "I could never convince the financiers that Disneyland was feasible because dreams offer too little collateral." Even then, He understood that to pursue dreams was to challenge the limits of practicality. In the coming years, Walt would not only prove that imagination had value, he would redefine it as one of the most powerful forces in modern culture. His humble beginnings, shaped by hard work, family, and small-town wonder, formed the moral and creative foundation for everything that followed. From Marceline's red brick streets to Hollywood's golden lights, the boy who once drew farm animals in Missouri was about to give the world a mouse, and with it, an empire built on hope, laughter, and boundless imagination. When Walt Disney arrived in California in 1923, he was just 21 years old, brimming with determination but nearly penniless. The Los Angeles of the 1920s was a place of promise, a young city where film studios were beginning to sprout like wildflowers after rain. Walt's goal was simple, yet audacious, to make a name for himself in this new world of moving pictures. He first joined his brother Roy, who was recovering from tuberculosis at the time. The brothers shared a deep bond built on loyalty, mutual trust, and a shared belief in Walt's artistic potential. Together, they founded the Disney Brothers Studio, setting up shop in a small office on Kingswell Avenue. Their early productions were modest, but they carried the spark of innovation that would soon define their brand. Walt's first major project was the Alice Comedies, a series of shorts that combined live action and animation, a novel concept at the time. The films followed a live-action girl named Alice, who interacted with animated characters in whimsical adventures. It was a clever inversion of reality, blending two worlds in ways audiences had never seen before. These shorts, distributed by Margaret Winkler, found modest success, providing enough income to keep the studio afloat. But beneath the surface, Walt was already thinking beyond Alice. He wanted to create fully animated stories that would charm both children and adults alike. Stories that spoke not just to laughter, but to the heart. The studio grew, and Walt hired talented artists, among them his old friend Ub Iwerks, whose precision and speed made him indispensable. Together they created a new character, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. With his floppy ears, playful grin, and mischievous personality, Oswald became a hit. Audiences loved him, and the shorts were distributed widely by Universal Pictures. For a time, it seemed Walt had finally found success. Yet in 1928, disaster struck. When Walt went to New York to renegotiate his contract, he discovered that Universal, through legal loopholes, owned the rights to Oswald. Worse still, most of his animators were poached by the distributor. Walt had lost his first beloved creation, and nearly everything he had built. The train ride back to California was one of the darkest moments of Walt's life, but it was also the crucible of his greatest idea. As legend has it, somewhere on that journey, Walt sketched a cheerful little mouse with round ears, a mischievous smile, and boundless spirit. Originally named Mortimer Mouse, the character was soon renamed Mickey, at the suggestion of Walt's wife Lillian, who thought the former name sounded too pompous. That small act of renaming marked the beginning of an empire. Mickey Mouse would soon become the most recognizable figure in animation and a global symbol of joy and perseverance. The first Mickey cartoon, Plain Crazy, was silent and failed to gain a distributor. The second, Gallopin' Gaucho, met a similar fate. But Walt refused to give up. Then came the breakthrough, Steamboat Willie. Released on November 18, 1928, it was the first cartoon to synchronize sound with animation, a daring and costly innovation at the time. The moment audiences saw Mickey whistling at the wheel of his steamboat, accompanied by synchronized sound effects and music, they were spellbound. The short was an instant triumph, and Mickey Mouse became a sensation overnight. Steamboat Willie not only saved the Disney Brothers studio, but redefined animation itself. It proved that cartoons could be more than simple amusements. They could be art. Walt's insistence on technical perfection and emotional storytelling elevated animation to new heights. Under his leadership, the studio produced a string of successful Mickey shorts, followed by the introduction of beloved characters like Minnie Mouse, Donald Duck, Goofy, and Pluto. Each was distinct in personality, yet they all reflected Walt's belief that even the simplest drawings could express deep human emotions. By the early 1930s, Mickey Mouse had become a cultural icon. Children idolized him. Adults found comfort in his cheerfulness during the dark days of the Great Depression. Mickey's optimism mirrored the spirit of the American dream, the idea that perseverance and goodness could triumph over adversity. Walt once remarked, "Mickey Mouse is, to me, a symbol of independence. He means laughter and independence and hope." That hope was contagious, spreading across movie screens worldwide. Walt, however, was not content with fame alone. He wanted to push the medium further, to create films that told full emotional stories rather than short gags. He saw potential in animation to rival live-action cinema, to move audiences not just to laughter, but to tears. Many in Hollywood mocked his ambition, calling it Disney's folly. But Walt's mind was fixed on a vision, a feature-length animated film that would blend art, music, and storytelling into a single emotional experience. As the studio expanded, Walt poured all his resources into innovation. He introduced the Silly Symphonies, a series of musical shorts that allowed animators to experiment with new techniques, color, and synchronized sound. The most famous of these, The Skeleton Dance, 1929, displayed a whimsical, macabre humor that captivated audiences. But it was Flowers and Trees, 1932, that truly made history as the first cartoon produced in full color using Technicolor. It won the first Academy Award for Best Animated Short, a testament to Disney's relentless pursuit of excellence. That same year, Walt himself received a special Academy Award for the creation of Mickey Mouse, solidifying his reputation as the pioneer of modern animation. Yet, for all his success, he remained restless. He once told his team, "We can't stand still, we must always explore and experiment." That mindset would soon lead to one of the most daring experiments in film history, the making of Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the world's first full-length animated feature. But before Snow White could bring color and magic to the silver screen, Walt had to build the foundation, a studio, a team, and a new way of thinking about storytelling. What began as a mouse and a dream was rapidly becoming an empire of imagination. Walt's vision had transcended the ordinary boundaries of entertainment, transforming animation from a novelty into an art form capable of moving the human heart. From the ashes of failure, Walt had created something enduring, a reminder that imagination, when coupled with perseverance, could turn even the smallest creature into a cultural giant. Mickey Mouse was not merely a character, he was a symbol of resilience, hope, and the unbreakable spirit of his creator. By the mid-1930s, Walt Disney stood on the threshold of greatness. He had transformed a modest animation studio into a growing creative powerhouse, powered by innovation, ambition, and a tireless belief in the magic of storytelling. But as his fame spread, so did his appetite for risk. Walt was no longer content with short, cheerful cartoons. He wanted to elevate animation into a medium capable of conveying deep emotion and cinematic grandeur. It was a dream that many in Hollywood dismissed as folly, but Walt had never been deterred by skepticism. To him, impossibility was simply the starting point of innovation. The idea that would redefine his career came to life in 1934. A feature-length animated film based on the beloved Brothers Grimm fairy tale Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. From the very beginning, the project was an audacious gamble. No one had ever attempted a full-length animated movie before, and even Walt's closest associates doubted it could succeed. Critics in Hollywood derided it as Disney's folly, certain that audiences would never sit through a 90-minute cartoon. But Walt believed otherwise. He envisioned a film that would capture the full spectrum of human emotion, joy, fear, love, loss, all told through animation. Walt poured everything he had into Snow White. He mortgaged his house, invested the studio's savings, and demanded the absolute best from his animators. To achieve lifelike motion and emotional realism, the animators studied live actors and drew thousands of detailed sketches. The film's budget ballooned to $1.5 million, an astronomical sum during the Great Depression. Yet through every obstacle, Walt's vision never wavered. He often reminded his team, "I never called my work an art. It's part of show business, the business of building entertainment." When Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs premiered at the Carthay Circle Theatre in Los Angeles on December 21st, 1937, it was nothing short of a revelation. Audiences were enchanted. They laughed, cried, and gasped, utterly captivated by the film's beauty and emotional power. As the final scene faded and Snow White rode off with her prince, the crowd erupted into applause. Grown men wept openly. The critics called it a masterpiece, and it went on to become the highest-grossing film of its time, earning more than $8 million, equivalent to hundreds of millions today. The triumph of Snow White transformed the Disney Brothers studio into an empire. In 1939, with profits from the film, Walt built a new state-of-the-art studio in Burbank, California. It was a creative utopia, complete with animation buildings, recording stages, sound facilities, and a campus-like atmosphere that encouraged collaboration and innovation. This was no longer a small animation workshop, it was the beating heart of a new kind of storytelling enterprise. Walt's next projects were equally ambitious, though not without struggle. Pinocchio, 1940, and Fantasia, 1940, were both artistic triumphs but financial disappointments, largely due to the outbreak of World War II, which cut off the European market. Nevertheless, these films showcased Disney's unrelenting commitment to experimentation. Pinocchio pushed the limits of animation realism and moral depth, while Fantasia merged classical music with visual art, creating a sensory experience that critics hailed as revolutionary. In 1941, however, Walt faced one of the greatest challenges of his career, an internal crisis that threatened to destroy everything he had built. A labor strike erupted at the Disney studio, fueled by long working hours and perceived inequality among staff. For the first time, Walt's carefully cultivated image as a benevolent leader was tested. He was deeply hurt by the strike, seeing it not as a business dispute but as a personal betrayal. The once close bond between Walt and his artists fractured, leaving scars that would never fully heal. During the war years, the studio shifted its focus to government-sponsored training and propaganda films. Walt collaborated with the U.S. government to produce educational shorts like The New Spirit, 1942, and Victory Through Air Power, 1943, which promoted patriotism and wartime awareness. Although these projects kept the studio financially afloat, they also limited Walt's creative freedom, yet even amid the challenges of war, his imagination continued to soar. He was already envisioning new frontiers, both on the screen and beyond. When peace returned, Walt renewed his focus on storytelling. The late 1940s and early 1950s saw the release of several beloved classics: Cinderella, 1950, Alice in Wonderland, 1951, Peter Pan, 1953, and Lady and the Tramp, 1955. Each showcased Disney's signature blend of heart, humor, and artistry. Cinderella, in particular, marked a comeback for the studio, restoring its financial stability and proving that Walt's magic was still alive. But as much as Walt loved film, his mind was already wandering beyond the silver screen. He began to dream of a place where families could step into the worlds his movies created, a place filled with imagination, joy, and timeless wonder. It would not be a carnival or a fairground, but something entirely new, a clean, immersive environment where fantasy and reality could coexist. Disneyland, he called it. Many dismissed the idea as unrealistic. Building a theme park was expensive, risky, and far outside the traditional scope of filmmaking. But Walt had never been bound by convention. Just as he had done with Snow White, he gathered the best minds in his company and began turning sketches into blueprints. He mortgaged his future yet again, forming a new division, UBWED Enterprises, dedicated solely to bringing Disneyland to life. He even pitched the concept on television, sharing his dream with the American public. Walt Disney's empire was no longer just a studio. It was becoming a symbol of imagination itself. From a boy sketching on a Missouri farm to the head of a global creative powerhouse, Walt had turned perseverance and imagination into art, art into business, and business into legacy. And yet, even as his dreams materialized into castles, trains, and fairy tales, Walt's eyes were already fixed on the next horizon, the place where dreams would become destinations and imagination would take physical form. The next chapter of his journey would prove to be his boldest yet, the birth of Disneyland, the most ambitious dream of all. The 1950s marked the most transformative decade in Walt Disney's career, a time when he redefined not only the boundaries of animation, but the very essence of popular culture. With his studio flourishing and the American economy booming after World War II, Walt stood at the center of a cultural shift. The public was hungry for optimism, color, and entertainment that reflected the renewed spirit of post-war America. And Walt, ever the visionary, was ready to meet that demand, not just in theaters but in homes, classrooms, and hearts around the world. In 1950, Cinderella became the film that revived the Disney Studios' financial fortunes. More than a fairy tale, it was a metaphor for Walt's own journey, perseverance through hardship rewarded by triumph. The film's dazzling animation, emotional storytelling, and unforgettable songs struck a chord with audiences everywhere. For Walt, Cinderella represented not merely a return to success, but a reaffirmation of faith in his guiding principle, that imagination and hard work could transform dreams into reality. The early 1950s also saw Disney's relentless pursuit of technological advancement. He pioneered new animation techniques that elevated storytelling to new artistic heights. The introduction of the multiplane camera allowed animators to create a sense of depth and realism never before seen in cartoons. This technology gave films like Alice in Wonderland 1951 and Peter Pan 1953 their rich, immersive visual style, enabling audiences to feel as though they were soaring through Neverland or tumbling down the rabbit hole. Walt's obsession with detail became legendary. Every background, every motion, every note of music had to serve the emotional truth of the story. Yet Walt's ambitions extended beyond the cinema. He saw in television a new frontier for storytelling, a way to bring his magic directly into people's homes. Many film executives scoffed at television, believing it to be a threat to the movie industry. But Walt, ever the innovator, saw opportunity where others saw risk. In 1954, he launched the Disneyland television show, later The Wonderful World of Disney, a weekly program that not only entertained but also subtly promoted his upcoming projects, including his most audacious dream yet, the creation of Disneyland itself. The show was an instant hit, reaching millions of viewers and introducing a new generation to Walt's world of wonder. During this period, Disney's films became cultural milestones. Lady and the Tramp 1955 charmed audiences with its romantic charm and advanced use of CinemaScope, the widescreen technology that gave the film an elegant, cinematic feel. The spaghetti sharing scene between Lady and Tramp became one of the most iconic moments in film history, a testament to Disney's ability to convey deep emotion through simple gestures. In 1959, Sleeping Beauty dazzled audiences with its stylized art direction and Tchaikovsky-inspired score. Though initially not a major financial success, it later became one of the studio's most beloved classics, revered for its artistry and ambition. At the same time, Walt was diversifying his creative empire. His studio began producing live-action films, starting with Treasure Island 1950 and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea 1954. These ventures allowed Walt to experiment with new forms of visual storytelling and reach broader audiences. Mary Poppins 1964, perhaps the most acclaimed of all his live-action endeavors, would later become the perfect synthesis of live-action, animation, and music, the crowning jewel of Walt's cinematic career. But beyond the films themselves, Walt's greatest innovation during this era was his ability to craft experiences that transcended the screen. His understanding of narrative extended beyond stories. It encompassed the way people felt when they encountered his creations. This philosophy became the foundation for his next great venture, Disneyland. Disneyland was not simply a theme park, it was a living, breathing story. Every detail was intentional, from the smell of popcorn on Main Street to the way Sleeping Beauty Castle framed the horizon. Walt wanted visitors to feel as if they had stepped inside the movies themselves, surrounded by the worlds they had loved from afar. When Disneyland opened on July 17, 1955 in Anaheim, California, it was a marvel of imagination brought to life. The opening day was chaotic. Rides broke down, food ran out, and counterfeit tickets flooded the gates. But none of that mattered. Families from across the nation had witnessed something new, a place where fantasy became tangible, where children and adults could share joy equally. Television played a crucial role in shaping Disneyland's success. The live broadcast of the park's opening, hosted by Ronald Reagan, Art Linkletter, and Bob Cummings, reached an estimated 90 million viewers, half the US population at the time. Overnight, Disneyland became a national sensation. Walt had bridged the gap between film, television, and physical experience in a way no one had imagined possible. In the years that followed, the park continued to evolve, mirroring Walt's restless creativity. New lands and attractions emerged: Tomorrowland, Adventureland, Frontierland, each meticulously designed to tell a story. Walt was known to roam the park incognito, observing visitors and taking notes. He wanted everything to feel perfect, because Disneyland, to him, was a reflection of his heart. "Disneyland will never be completed," he once said. "It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in the world." The success of Disneyland transformed Walt Disney Productions into a cultural phenomenon. The Disney name had become synonymous with creativity, family, and wonder. His company expanded into television, music, publishing, and international distribution, laying the groundwork for the multimedia empire that endures today. More importantly, Walt had established a legacy that extended far beyond entertainment. He had created an ideal, a vision of a world where innocence, imagination, and optimism still mattered. As the 1950s drew to a close, Walt Disney was no longer just an animator or filmmaker. He was a global icon, a symbol of American creativity, enterprise, and hope. Yet even as he stood atop his empire, his mind was already turning toward new horizons. Cities of the future, parks that blended technology and nature, and stories that transcended time itself. The man who had once drawn mice on scrap paper was now shaping the dreams of nations. But the next decade, filled with breathtaking innovations and profound challenges, would test not only Walt's genius, but his endurance. His imagination, though boundless, would soon meet the limits of mortality. And yet, even in the shadow of that truth, Walt Disney continued to dream. Not just for himself, but for the world he was building, one story, one park, one heart at a time. For Walt Disney, dreams were never static ideas. They were living blueprints, waiting for courage and imagination to bring them to life. By the early 1950s, after decades of redefining animation and film, Walt's restless creativity turned toward an entirely new canvas, a place where families could step inside the magic of his movies and experience it together. This vision would become Disneyland, not merely an amusement park, but a new kind of storytelling realm, one where fantasy and reality blended seamlessly. The seed of Disneyland was planted during Walt's Sunday outings with his daughters, Diane and Sharon. While sitting on park benches at Griffith Park in Los Angeles, Walt would watch them ride the carousel. He loved seeing their joy, but he also noticed something missing. The parks of his era were noisy, dirty, and unwelcoming to adults. Walt imagined something different, a place that parents and children could enjoy together, a world that combined the joy of childhood with the cleanliness, order, and wonder of the movies. "I just felt that there should be something built where the parents and the children could have fun together," he later recalled. This simple thought became an obsession. Walt began sketching ideas, filling notebooks with plans for themed areas that would celebrate adventure, fantasy, and the American spirit. Early concepts included Mickey Mouse Park, a small family attraction near the Disney studio in Burbank. But as his imagination expanded, so did the project's scale. What began as a modest park evolved into a grand vision, a city of dreams that would embody everything Walt believed in: innovation, imagination, and the enduring goodness of people. To realize this vision, Walt assembled a team of artists, engineers, and designers, people who would come to be known as Imagineers. These men and women were tasked with the unprecedented challenge of turning Walt's fantasy into reality. "Hey, it's kind of fun to do the impossible," Walt liked to say, and Disneyland would soon prove that impossible dreams could indeed be built from steel and concrete. Funding, however, was a major obstacle. Traditional investors were skeptical, dismissing the project as too risky. Amusement parks had a reputation for being cheap and short-lived. No one believed a theme park could sustain long-term success. But Walt was undeterred. He mortgaged his own life insurance, borrowed against his future, and struck a groundbreaking deal with ABC Television. In exchange for financing part of Disneyland's construction, ABC would receive rights to air the Disneyland television show. The partnership not only provided the funds Walt needed, but also gave him a platform to share his vision with millions of Americans before the park even opened. By 1954, construction on Disneyland began in Anaheim, California, a patch of 160 acres of orange groves. It was an enormous undertaking, completed in just 1 year under Walt's watchful eye. Every detail mattered to him: the angle of the cobblestones on Main Street, the authenticity of the Frontierland buildings, the way the castle spires caught the afternoon light. Walt was everywhere, inspecting, revising, dreaming aloud. He saw Disneyland not merely as a place of rides, but as a story. Each land, Adventureland, Frontierland, Fantasyland, and Tomorrowland, would represent a different chapter of that story, guiding guests through the landscapes of imagination. Opening day, July 17, 1955, was both triumphant and chaotic. Thousands of invited guests, celebrities, and reporters filled the park, many of them with counterfeit tickets that overwhelmed the gates. The summer heat soared to over 100 degrees, the freshly poured asphalt softened beneath women's heels, and several rides broke down. To make matters worse, food ran short, and the water fountains malfunctioned due to a plumber's strike. The event, televised live across the country, was nearly a disaster. Critics dubbed it Black Sunday. But Walt refused to see failure, only beginnings. In the days that followed, he reassured his team, fixed what needed fixing, and welcomed new guests with the same optimism that had guided his entire career. Within weeks, the crowds returned, and Disneyland became a sensation. Families traveled from across the nation to walk down Main Street, ride the Jungle Cruise, and soar through the skies in Dumbo. For many visitors, Disneyland was the first place that felt truly magical, a world without cynicism, where kindness and imagination ruled. Walt described Disneyland as a show, and in many ways it was the ultimate manifestation of his artistic philosophy. Every ride told a story, every corner was designed to evoke emotion. From the smell of popcorn and fresh paint on Main Street to the carefully synchronized sounds of the railroad and carousel, nothing was accidental. Disneyland was immersive storytelling long before the term existed, a cinematic experience made tangible. Beyond its entertainment value, Disneyland reflected Walt's belief in the future. Tomorrowland, in particular, showcased his fascination with science and progress. It presented a hopeful vision of humanity's potential, a world where technology and creativity worked together to build a better tomorrow. This optimism resonated deeply with the American public, who saw in Disneyland a mirror of their post-war aspirations. Within a year of its opening, Disneyland welcomed over 3.5 million visitors. The park became a cultural phenomenon, cementing Walt Disney's status as one of the most influential figures of the 20th century. He had done more than build an amusement park. He had created a symbol of joy and unity. For millions, Disneyland became a sanctuary of happiness, a reminder that wonder could still thrive in a rapidly changing world. As the park flourished, Walt continued to refine and expand it. New attractions such as the Matterhorn bobsleds, 1959, Submarine Voyage, and Monorail pushed the boundaries of design and engineering. Walt personally tested rides, offering feedback and suggesting improvements. His relentless attention to detail set a new standard for theme parks around the world. To him, Disneyland was never finished. It was alive, constantly evolving, just as imagination itself never stood still. In the years that followed, Disneyland would inspire a global movement. Theme parks in Florida, Tokyo, Paris, and beyond, but none would ever match the spirit of the original. For Walt, Disneyland was more than a business venture. It was a labor of love, a dream he built not for profit, but for people. Disneyland is your land, he told visitors. Here age relives fond memories of the past, and here youth may savor the challenge and promise of the future. Through Disneyland, Walt Disney gave the world something more than entertainment. He gave it hope. He showed that imagination, when pursued with faith and courage, could shape the real world as powerfully as it shaped the world of art. Disneyland was the physical embodiment of his life's philosophy, that no dream is too big and no dreamer too small. As Walt walked down Main Street on quiet evenings, watching families laugh beneath the glow of lanterns, he often said it was his happiest place on earth too. And though he could not yet know it, the park would outlive him, standing for generations as a monument to wonder, joy, and the enduring power of belief. By the late 1950s and into the 1960s, Walt Disney was at the height of his influence. He had conquered nearly every field he had ever touched: animation, film, television, and now themed entertainment. Yet, as with every great visionary, triumph brought with it new trials. Beneath the smiling exterior that America adored lay a man wrestling with exhaustion, perfectionism, and the ever-expanding weight of his own success. The world saw the dreamer. Those close to him saw the relentless worker who could never stop building. In the wake of Disneyland's success, the studio continued to flourish. Films such as Sleeping Beauty, 1959, and 101 Dalmatians, 1961, demonstrated that Walt's storytelling magic was alive and well. The latter, with its modern setting and innovative use of Xerox animation technology, was a financial triumph and introduced a new generation to the distinctive Disney style. Yet Walt himself was increasingly preoccupied with projects beyond the screen. His creative mind, like a restless compass, pointed toward uncharted directions, the future of cities, transportation, and human innovation. Still, the film industry remained a vital part of Walt's empire. In 1964, Mary Poppins became one of the greatest successes in Disney history. The film was a masterpiece of blending live action with animation, and its emotional core, the idea that imagination could heal and uplift, was pure Walt. Julie Andrews' portrayal of the magical nanny, combined with songs like A Spoonful of Sugar and Feed the Birds, captured hearts around the world. The film earned 5 Academy Awards and solidified Disney's status as a creative powerhouse. Walt was deeply proud of Mary Poppins. He often called it the finest film his studio had ever made. However, while the public saw a golden era, internally the Disney organization was undergoing strain. Walt's perfectionism, which had once inspired, now sometimes intimidated his employees. He demanded excellence in every detail, often pushing his teams to their limits. His brother Roy, the steady financial hand behind the empire, frequently clashed with him over the costs of his ambitious ideas. But for Walt, money was never the goal. It was a tool to build dreams. "You reach a point where you don't work for money," he once said. "You work for joy." Walt's joy was invention, and nowhere was this clearer than in his growing fascination with technology and the future. The early 1960s were a time of rapid innovation in America. The space race was underway, and optimism about the future was everywhere. Walt wanted to capture that spirit and channel it into something meaningful. His first step came in the form of the 1964 New York World's Fair. Disney was invited to design several attractions, including It's a Small World, the Carousel of Progress, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, and Ford's Magic Skyway. These exhibits became massive hits, showcasing Disney's mastery of storytelling through engineering. The audio animatronics technology used for Abraham Lincoln and the singing dolls of It's a Small World marked a breakthrough in mechanical design, the perfect fusion of art and innovation. The fair introduced millions of visitors to Disney's unique blend of heart and technology. And it also gave Walt a laboratory to test ideas that would later shape the next great phase of his career. But even as the fair succeeded, Walt faced personal struggles. His health, long neglected in his pursuit of excellence, began to decline. He had been a lifelong smoker, and years of stress had taken their toll. Colleagues noticed he was aging quickly. His once boundless energy now came in bursts. Yet Walt refused to slow down. Instead, he plunged into planning what he called his most important project, one that would surpass even Disneyland. This new idea was the Florida Project, which would later evolve into Walt Disney World. But Walt's original concept was far more ambitious than a theme park. He envisioned the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, Epcot. It was to be a living city, powered by innovation, efficiency, and harmony. In Walt's vision, Epcot would be a blueprint for the future, where technology and community would coexist in perfect balance. "It will never cease to be a living blueprint of the future," he explained in a 1966 presentation film. Epcot was not a fantasy. It was his answer to the problems of urban decay, pollution, and social disconnection. Walt poured his energy into designing this futuristic city, mapping out transportation systems, energy grids, and residential zones. He wanted to reinvent the way people lived, not through fantasy, but through forward-thinking design. Epcot was Walt's final grand dream, a culmination of his belief that imagination could improve the human condition. However, fate had other plans. In November 1966, Walt Disney was diagnosed with lung cancer. The news was devastating. For the first time in his life, he faced a battle he could not outthink or outwork. Doctors removed one of his lungs, but the disease had already spread. In the hospital, Walt continued to dream, using the ceiling tiles above his bed as a canvas to describe his vision for Epcot to his brother Roy and his Imagineers. Even in weakness, his mind never stopped creating. On December 15, 1966, just 10 days after his 65th birthday, Walt Disney passed away. The world mourned deeply. Newspapers across the globe carried headlines like, "The man who made the world smile." Employees at Disneyland lowered the flag to half-staff. At the studio there was silence, a silence that felt like the closing of an era. For millions, it was as if a light had gone out of the world. Yet even in death, Walt's presence lingered everywhere. His voice echoed in the laughter of children, his imagination sparkled in the films he left behind, and his optimism was woven into the very fabric of American culture. Roy Disney, ever the loyal brother, postponed his retirement to complete Walt's final dream, Walt Disney World. When the park opened in Florida in 1971, Roy insisted on naming it in honor of his brother. "Everyone knows his name," Roy said simply, "so let's call it what it is, Walt Disney World." Walt's passing marked not an end, but a transformation. His ideas, from Mickey Mouse to Disneyland to Epcot, were not monuments to one man's genius, but gifts to the world. Each creation carried within it a message that would outlive him, that wonder is never outdated, that imagination has no limits, and that joy can change the world. The years following his death would see the Disney legacy expand far beyond what he could have imagined. Yet for those who knew him best, the measure of Walt Disney's greatness was not in his empire, but in his heart. He believed that the world could be better, happier, kinder, more creative, and he devoted his life to proving it. Even as time marched on, that belief remained, glowing like a lantern in the window of his beloved Main Street, forever guiding dreamers home. The final years of Walt Disney's life were marked by a profound duality, a man facing his mortality, even as his imagination reached for immortality. Though his health declined, his mind seemed to burn brighter than ever, consumed with ideas that reached far beyond entertainment. To many, he was already a legend, but Walt himself never saw it that way. He saw only unfinished stories, unrealized worlds, and dreams still waiting to be built. After the phenomenal success of Mary Poppins in 1964, Walt could have retired with unmatched acclaim. He had revolutionized animation, redefined the film industry, and created Disneyland, a living, breathing monument to imagination. But retirement was an alien concept to him. He often said, "The way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing." His doing never stopped. Walt's gaze was now fixed on the horizon, specifically on Central Florida, where his final dream, the Florida Project, was beginning to take shape. The project's scope was staggering. Walt envisioned an entire city dedicated to progress, innovation, and community, the experimental prototype community of tomorrow, or Epcot. It would not be a theme park, but a living city with residents, schools, and transportation systems powered by cutting-edge technology. The idea stemmed from his lifelong fascination with invention and efficiency. He wanted to solve the problems of modern urban life, congestion, pollution, and isolation, by designing a city from the ground up with optimism and purpose. Epcot would sit at the heart of a larger entertainment complex, what we now know as Walt Disney World. Around it would be resorts, recreation areas, and theme parks, all designed to create a model for living that reflected the best of human potential. In Walt's mind, It was not fantasy. It was the next logical evolution of imagination. He believed that just as animation could bring drawings to life, design and technology could bring utopian ideals into reality. Walt personally oversaw every detail of the Florida project's early planning. He worked with architects, engineers, and urban designers to develop transportation systems, housing layouts, and even the logistics of climate control. He recorded a 25-minute film in 1966, explaining his vision for Epcot, a city that would constantly evolve, never stagnate, and always look toward the future. His eyes lit up as he described it, his voice brimming with conviction. Epcot will be an experimental prototype community that will always be in a state of becoming, he said. But as construction plans advanced, Walt's health began to fail. The years of stress, long hours, and heavy smoking had taken their toll. In November 1966, he was diagnosed with lung cancer. Ever the optimist, he downplayed the illness to those around him, focusing instead on the work. Even while hospitalized, he continued to dream, literally sketching plans for Epcot on the ceiling tiles above his bed, directing his brother Roy and the Imagineers as though he were still in the studio. Walt Disney passed away on December 15, 1966. The news rippled across the world, leaving a silence that seemed almost sacred. Newspapers mourned, "The man who taught us to dream." Flags flew at half-staff at Disneyland, and visitors left flowers at the base of Sleeping Beauty Castle. Millions of people, from presidents to children, felt as though they had lost a friend. For decades, Walt had been a constant presence in American life, his voice familiar, his smile reassuring, his creations shaping the very fabric of childhood. Roy Disney, heartbroken but resolute, vowed to complete his brother's final dream. "Walt left us a legacy that must be carried forward," he declared. In 1971, 5 years after Walt's death, Walt Disney World opened in Orlando, Florida. The park was enormous, nearly 30,000 acres, and it embodied the grandeur of Walt's original ambitions. Roy personally dedicated the park with tears in his eyes, insisting that his brother's name be forever attached to it. "Everyone knows his name, so it's only right," he said quietly. Roy himself passed away just 2 months later, having fulfilled his final promise. Though Walt did not live to see Epcot realized in the form he imagined, its spirit endured. In 1982, the Epcot Center opened as a theme park devoted to innovation, culture, and the promise of the future. While it was not a functioning city, it reflected Walt's belief that humanity could build a better tomorrow through curiosity, cooperation, and imagination. The park's dedication plaque reads, "May Epcot inspire a new generation of dreamers," the continuing legacy of Walt Disney. In the years following his death, Walt's influence expanded beyond measure. His company, under new leadership, grew into a global entertainment empire encompassing television, music, publishing, and international resorts. But more importantly, the ideals he championed, creativity, optimism, perseverance, and family, became part of the cultural DNA of generations. Every Disney film, from The Lion King to Frozen, carries echoes of his spirit. Every visit to a Disney park rekindles the sense of wonder he believed the world should never lose. Walt Disney's legacy cannot be measured solely in profits or popularity. It lives in the smiles of children meeting Mickey for the first time, in the collective gasp of a darkened theater when the castle logo shimmers on screen, and in the millions who still dare to dream because he once told them they could. He was a man who turned fantasy into architecture, art into motion, and imagination into an enduring way of life. Perhaps the truest measure of his legacy lies in his own words. "Laughter is timeless, imagination has no age, and dreams are forever." Even decades after his passing, the world he built continues to laugh, imagine, and dream. The lamp that burns eternally in his old apartment above the firehouse on Main Street in Disneyland stands as a silent testament, a light for dreamers everywhere. It reminds us that while Walt Disney the man is gone, Walt Disney the spirit will never fade. The passing of Walt Disney in December 1966 left an unfillable void in the creative world. To millions, it felt as if the world had lost its imagination. To those within the company, it was like losing both a leader and the soul that had guided every decision, every project, every dream. Yet the great irony of Walt Disney's death was that his vision was too vast to die with him. His ideas, his values, and his unyielding optimism had already been woven into the DNA of his studio. And in the years that followed, those ideas would evolve, expand, and reach corners of the world Walt himself had only dreamed of. After Walt's passing, his brother Roy Disney became the steward of his legacy. Roy was not as publicly celebrated as Walt, but his role was no less crucial. He had always been the quiet architect behind Walt's dreams, the one who balanced the budgets and found ways to make the impossible possible. Now with his brother gone, Roy made it his mission to complete Walt's final vision, the construction of Walt Disney World in Florida. Roy oversaw every phase of the project, ensuring that every brick and beam reflected the ideals Walt had cherished. When the park opened on October 1, 1971, it was a monumental moment in entertainment history. The dedication ceremony was brief, but deeply emotional. Standing before a crowd of thousands, Roy said simply, "Walt Disney World is a tribute to the philosophy and life of Walter Elias Disney." Behind him, Cinderella Castle rose majestically, a monument not just to fantasy but to faith, perseverance, and family. Tragically, Roy died just 2 months later on December 20, 1971. The two brothers, dreamer and doer, had completed their life's work together, each fulfilling the other's destiny. Yet the company they built would continue to grow, guided by the very principles they had established: innovation, integrity, and imagination. Throughout the 1970s, the Walt Disney Company entered a period of cautious transition. Without Walt's leadership, the studio struggled to find a new creative identity. Animated films such as The Aristocats, 1970, Robin Hood, 1973, and The Rescuers, 1977, carried the familiar charm of Disney storytelling but lacked the visionary spark that had defined earlier masterpieces. The animators, many of whom had worked directly under Walt, were aging, and the younger generation, the so-called 9 old men successors, sought to redefine the art of animation for a new era. In live-action film, however, Disney continued to experiment. The 1970s saw hits like Escape to Witch Mountain, 1975, and The Apple Dumpling Gang, 1975, films that captured the family-friendly adventure spirit Walt had loved. Still, without his guiding hand, the company risked becoming a museum of its past glories rather than a creator of future wonders. By the early 1980s, a new generation of leadership emerged determined to revitalize Disney's legacy. The opening of Epcot Center in 1982 marked both an homage to Walt's futuristic vision and a reawakening of the company's creative energy. Epcot was not the self-sustaining city Walt had originally imagined, but rather a theme park dedicated to human progress, innovation, and global culture. With its twin sections, Future World and World Showcase, Epcot embodied Walt's enduring faith in humanity's ability to build, learn, and dream together. Around the same time, the animation department underwent a renaissance of its own. Under the leadership of Michael Eisner and Jeffrey Katzenberg, Disney entered a new golden age of animation beginning in the late 1980s. Films like The Little Mermaid, 1989, Beauty and the Beast, 1991, Aladdin, 1992, and The Lion King, 1994, captured the magic of Disney's early years while introducing cutting-edge technology and contemporary themes. These films redefined animation for a modern audience, blending breathtaking artistry with timeless storytelling, a perfect reflection of Walt's original philosophy. The Disney Renaissance, as it came to be known, restored the company's creative soul and global influence. Each film combined hand-drawn animation with musical storytelling that transcended generations. Beauty and the Beast even became the first animated film ever nominated for the Academy Award for Best Picture, a milestone that would have thrilled Walt, who had always sought to prove that animation could stand alongside live-action cinema as high art. During the 1990s, Disney also expanded its empire into new industries. The company acquired television networks such as ABC and ESPN, launched the Disney Channel, and opened international theme parks in Tokyo and Paris. Each expansion was rooted in the same principle that guided Walt: to share joy and wonder with as many people as possible. The brand became synonymous with global childhood. its characters, films, and parks serving as shared cultural touchstones from Los Angeles to Tokyo to Paris. By the early 2000s, Disney faced a new frontier, the digital age. The company adapted once again, embracing computer animation through its partnership with Pixar Animation Studios. The release of Toy Story in 1995, the first fully computer-animated feature film, revolutionized the industry and introduced a new era of storytelling. The eventual acquisition of Pixar in 2006, under CEO Bob Iger, marked a historic merger of creative philosophies. Pixar's technological brilliance fused seamlessly with Disney's timeless emotional storytelling, leading to modern classics like Finding Nemo, Up, and Inside Out. Under Iger's leadership, Disney expanded even further, acquiring major entertainment companies such as Marvel, 2009, Lucasfilm, 2012, and 21st Century Fox, 2019. These bold acquisitions transformed Disney into the largest and most powerful media conglomerate in the world, housing franchises from Star Wars to the Avengers. Yet through all this growth, the heart of the company remained the same: the celebration of imagination and the belief that stories could unite people across cultures and generations. Modern Disney became not just a studio, but a cultural ecosystem, encompassing streaming services like Disney+, global theme parks, merchandise, and storytelling platforms that reached billions. Disneyland expanded into multiple parks around the world, in Tokyo, Paris, Hong Kong, and Shanghai, each a living testament to Walt's original dream. To all who come to this happy place, welcome. And yet, amid its vastness, the company has always retained something deeply human, a reflection of Walt himself. Every Pixar short, every film about courage and hope, every fireworks show above Cinderella Castle is a whisper of his enduring message. That imagination, when guided by love and optimism, can outlast even time itself. In this modern era, Disney's legacy continues to evolve. The studio experiments with diversity, inclusion, and new forms of storytelling, pushing animation and film toward broader horizons while remaining anchored in timeless values. Walt's dream has outgrown any one person, yet its essence remains unmistakable. His fingerprints linger on every frame, every melody, every smile that lights up a theater. More than 50 years after his death, Walt Disney's company stands not just as a monument to success, but as a living embodiment of creativity. It is the rare empire built not on conquest, but on imagination, and fueled not by greed, but by joy. In that sense, the company after Walt is still very much his, a dream that learned to dream on its own. Long after Walt Disney's death, the spirit of imagination he ignited continued to guide not only his company, but also generations of dreamers around the world. To understand Walt's enduring legacy, one must look beyond his films, his theme parks, and even his company. His true achievement lies in the way he reshaped humanity's relationship with imagination itself, how he turned fantasy into a shared language of hope, courage, and joy. Imagination to Walt was never a fleeting luxury. It was a force, a living energy that could transform reality. He often said, "If you can dream it, you can do it," and that mantra became the heartbeat of his life's work. Through every mouse and castle, every song and story, Walt taught the world that imagination wasn't just for children. It was a vital part of being human. He believed that creativity and optimism could overcome cynicism and fear, and that even in the darkest of times, stories had the power to heal. In the decades since his passing, Disney's influence on culture has only deepened. The Disney name has become synonymous with magic, storytelling, and the belief in happy endings. Children grow up watching animated classics that teach kindness, bravery, and perseverance, while adults rediscover those same lessons through nostalgia. Every generation finds something new in Walt's creations, a reminder that imagination evolves with us. One of the most remarkable aspects of Walt's legacy is the universality of his work. His characters, Mickey Mouse, Cinderella, Simba, Elsa, transcend language and geography. They are not bound to any single culture, but speak to emotions that unite all people: love, wonder, courage, and hope. Across continents, Disney parks welcome millions who seek to step into that shared dream. In Tokyo Disneyland, families marvel at the same fireworks that glow over Florida's Magic Kingdom. In Paris, children hold the same mouse-shaped balloons that float down Main Street in Anaheim. Walt's imagination has become global yet deeply personal, a mirror reflecting the dreams of the human heart. The technological advancements Disney championed also continue to evolve. From the hand-drawn artistry of Snow White to the photorealism of The Lion King 2019 and the immersive storytelling of virtual reality experiences, Disney's commitment to innovation has never faltered. Walt's belief that technology and imagination could coexist remains a guiding philosophy for the company. His once radical idea that animation could express emotion paved the way for entire industries. Computer graphics, interactive media, and modern animation owe their existence to his pioneering spirit. Beyond entertainment, Walt Disney's legacy has also shaped education, architecture, and urban design. His Epcot concept, though never realized as a living city, inspired new ways of thinking about community planning and sustainable design. Many of the principles he proposed, such as efficient public transport, clean energy, and integrated community living, are now cornerstones of modern urban innovation. Walt's futuristic thinking transcended art. It touched the very foundations of how society could imagine its future. Equally enduring is the emotional connection his creations foster. At the heart of every Disney story is a moral truth, that goodness, even when challenged, prevails. Walt never shied away from hardship in his storytelling. He simply refused to let it have the last word. In a world that often feels cynical and fragmented, his works remind us of unity, empathy, and the importance of believing in something greater than ourselves. When Bambi loses his mother, when Simba runs from his past, or when Elsa learns to embrace who she is, each moment reflects a lesson Walt understood deeply, that struggle is part of growth, and that the human spirit, when nurtured by hope, is unbreakable. Walt Disney's influence also extends into the arts as a model of synthesis, the perfect fusion of storytelling, music, color, and motion. His studio became a training ground for generations of artists who learned that creativity flourishes not in isolation, but through collaboration. The same teamwork that brought Steamboat Willie to life continues in the bustling animation studios of Burbank and beyond, where artists and engineers blend art and science to push the boundaries of what's possible. Perhaps the most profound testament to Walt's enduring spirit is how his name still inspires creators in fields far beyond animation. Filmmakers, writers, architects, engineers, and educators all cite him as an influence. Steve Jobs admired Walt's ability to fuse creativity with technology. George Lucas modeled the immersive storytelling of Star Wars on the emotional structure of Disney films. Even NASA engineers and theme park designers reference Disney's principles of clarity, optimism, and human-centered design. Walt didn't just make movies, he reshaped the very idea of what imagination could achieve. At Disneyland, a light burns in the window of the apartment above the firehouse on Main Street, where Walt used to stay during park visits. It remains lit every day and night, symbolizing that his spirit still watches over his creation. Guests walking through the park often pause beneath that window, aware, perhaps subconsciously, that they are part of something larger than themselves. The ongoing dream of a man who believed that the world could be a happier place if people only dared to imagine it so. The endurance of Walt Disney's imagination lies not in how perfectly it was realized, but in how freely it continues to grow. The world has changed dramatically since his time. Technology has advanced, storytelling has diversified, and the company that bears his name has become vast beyond measure. Yet through all that evolution, the essence remains unchanged. The celebration of wonder, the triumph of hope, and the belief that imagination can make life extraordinary. In a way, Walt never truly left. Every child who picks up a crayon and dreams of a world that isn't yet real carries a spark of his legacy. Every creator who takes a risk in the name of beauty and joy walks a path he helped pave. The enduring spirit of imagination is not just Walt Disney's gift to the world, it is his challenge to it, to keep dreaming, to keep believing, and to never lose sight of the magic that lives within us all. More than half a century after his passing, Walt Disney's influence is woven into the very fabric of modern life. His name is not merely that of a man, but of a movement, a cultural phenomenon that reshaped entertainment, technology, and even the way the world perceives dreams. To speak of Walt Disney today is to speak of imagination itself, its endurance, its power, and its eternal relevance in an age often clouded by cynicism. The modern world Walt helped to build is both dazzling and complex. Screens now dominate everyday life. Stories reach us through devices he could scarcely have imagined. Yet even in this digital age, his vision remains timeless. Whether through the soft glow of the Disney castle before a movie, the laughter of children watching Frozen, or the immersive wonder of theme parks from Anaheim to Shanghai, Walt's dream continues to inspire connection in an era often defined by division. He taught the world that joy and storytelling are universal languages, capable of bridging generations, cultures, and ideologies. In a time of global change, the lessons embedded in Walt's work feel more vital than ever. His stories remind us of the beauty of simplicity and sincerity in a world that often celebrates spectacle over substance. When we watch Pinocchio learn the value of honesty, or The Lion King remind us that we all have a place in the circle of life, we are not merely being entertained, we are being reintroduced to the virtues that make life meaningful. Walt once said, "I would rather entertain and hope that people learn something than educate and hope they were entertained." That delicate balance of joy and wisdom remains at the heart of his legacy. Walt Disney's creative empire also redefined the global economy of imagination. His company became the archetype for creative industries, proving that artistry and commerce need not be enemies, but allies when guided by purpose. The success of Pixar, Marvel Studios, and Lucasfilm under the Disney banner demonstrates how his philosophy of storytelling, built on emotional truth and universal appeal, can thrive in every genre and medium. Even the rise of digital streaming through Disney Plus reflects Walt's pioneering spirit. He was, after all, one of the first to embrace new technologies like synchronized sound and television when others feared them. In every era, Disney innovation has echoed Walt's belief that progress is not the enemy of tradition but its natural evolution. Equally powerful is the moral dimension of his influence. Walt's belief in optimism, not naive escapism but a conscious choice to see goodness, remains a radical act in modern culture. His work insists that hope is not foolish, that imagination is not frivolous, and that kindness is not weakness. These ideas resonate profoundly in today's world, where creativity is often commodified and authenticity can feel scarce. To remember Walt Disney is to remember that art, at its highest form, should uplift the spirit and remind humanity of its better self. Disney's enduring relevance also lies in his understanding of the human heart. Long before neuroscience revealed the power of storytelling to shape empathy, Walt knew that stories could open minds and heal wounds. In Bambi's quiet grief, Dumbo's triumph over cruelty, and Cinderella's faith through hardship, he offered lessons of resilience that transcended generations. His ability to blend joy and sorrow, to make people laugh moments after they cried, reflected his own philosophy of life, that darkness exists, but light can always follow. Moreover, Walt's vision continues to shape how societies think about possibility itself. His belief in innovation as a moral duty, not just a business advantage, lives on in industries ranging from robotics to architecture. His concept of Epcot as a living community of progress inspired countless urban planners and sustainability advocates. The very idea that technology should serve humanity, not the other way around, remains one of his most prescient contributions to modern thought. Even in academia and the arts, Walt's life is studied not only for its achievements, but for its philosophy. He embodied the balance of imagination and discipline, dreaming grandly, yet building practically. His approach to storytelling, rooted in emotional honesty and technical precision, has influenced film schools, design studios, and creative institutions worldwide. He showed that to dream is not enough. One must build the dream with hands, heart, and humility. But perhaps the truest measure of his influence lies not in structures or profits, but in human experience. Every year, millions walk through Disneyland's gates, passing beneath the archway inscribed with the words, "Here you leave today and enter the world of yesterday, tomorrow, and fantasy." In those moments, the world slows. Adults rediscover the awe of childhood. Children believe without question that magic is real. That experience, fleeting yet eternal, is Walt Disney's greatest legacy. The ability to remind us, if only for a moment, of who we are when we dream without fear. In the modern world, full of noise, distraction, and uncertainty, Walt's vision stands as both refuge and challenge. He built not just an entertainment empire, but a philosophy of wonder that asks humanity to keep believing in the good, the beautiful, and the possible. His empire was never made merely of castles and cartoons, but of faith in imagination, in progress, and in people themselves. As technology continues to evolve and society redefines storytelling, Walt Disney's legacy grows only more profound. His dream, to unite art and heart, fantasy and future, endures in every spark of creativity that dares to make the world a little brighter. The lamp that burns in his window above Disneyland's firehouse shines not only for nostalgia, but as a beacon, a reminder that imagination, when nurtured with hope, can outlive the dreamer who began it. And so the story of Walt Disney is not one of a man who built an empire, but of a dream that built a world. His vision reminds us that the truest kind of magic is not found in spells or fairy dust, but in courage. The courage to dream, to create, and to believe that the future can be beautiful.